Unit 8, Period 8. Today we're going to talk about the Cold War through the presidency of Jimmy Carter. The time period in Unit 8 that we'll be discussing is the end of World War II, 1945, up into the end of Jimmy Carter's presidency, which was 1980. The first topic that we need to talk about, of course, is the Cold War. And what was the Cold War? The Cold War is defined as a war of words that existed between the Soviet Union and the United States as soon as World War II was over. Russia, or the Soviet Union, a communist country who was an ally of the United States during World War II, begins to systematically take over countries surrounding it in Eastern Europe. This is a problem for the United States because the Soviet Union was a type of government that brought fear to the United States, something known as the Red Scare, and that goes back to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, where communists took over their government. The definition of communism is the government ownership of the factors of production, which is land, labor, and capital. The United States is a capitalist country, a free enterprise country. We are democratic. The Soviet Union is more of a dictatorship. And so in the 1920s, a lot of Southern and Eastern Europeans were immigrating to the United States, and many of these were from Eastern Europe. And there was a lot of nativism towards these people in the United States. So there's a history behind this fear of the Soviet Union and a reason why the Cold War is such an important part of our legacy. This is the American flag and this is the Soviet flag. The policy of the United States is going to become one of containment, to contain Soviet expansion or growth in Europe. And this is going to be written down and spoken first by President Harry S. Truman, who replaced Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president during World War II. Truman's policy of containment dealt with communism, and that is to stop the spread of the Soviet Union. In this map here, you can see that as soon as World War II was over, the Soviet Union began to expand its influence over Poland. It took over half of Germany. It became known as East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. The idea for the United States was, and the reason why it established this foreign policy was something called the domino theory, is that if we allowed the Soviet Union, in this case its leader Stalin, to take over one country in Eastern Europe, it might eventually take over all the countries in Eastern Europe. So the plan to stop this became known as the Marshall Plan. Congress funded millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to Eastern and Western European countries for them to be able to rebuild. The idea here is to avoid the problems that had led to World War II in the first place, and that is, after World War I, the Allies had punished the Germans and had thrown their economy into a depression. Hitler rose from the ashes of that depression, and the people followed him. What we did not want repeating after World War II was this worldwide depression and the people of Europe adopting dictators as they had done before. So in this case, the United States sent food, as pictured here, steel, concrete, tractors, seed, cash, all kinds of things to these countries shown in gray here to help build them up so that they could withstand the encroachments of communist Eastern European countries. So this was the economic plan to contain communism. There was also a military plan begun, and this was called NATO. The NATO countries are signified on this map in yellow, and this is a defense organization, an alliance, as you will, to combat Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe. So these armies train together, they share ammunition, they share weapons, and they share strategy so that they could stop the spread of communism in Eastern Europe. I'm going to watch a short film on the Cold War.
But not all American foreign relations were working out so well. The Soviet Union, a U.S. ally during World War II, objected to many post-war conditions established by the other superpowers. At the first meeting of the United Nations, Soviet representatives walked out in protest. The Soviets feared expansion of American power around the world, and the United States feared Soviet expansion. Another kind of conflict known as the Cold War was born. The Cold War never escalated into physical warfare, but the U.S. and the Soviet Union sometimes supported opposing sides. In the early 50s, the U.S. sent troops to fight for Southern Korea in its war with the North. The North was backed by the Soviet Union and China. The two sides eventually reached an agreement to divide the country into two separate nations, North Korea and South Korea. But thousands of Americans had been killed, captured, or wounded during the conflict. Mutual fear and suspicion between the Soviets and the United States continued to cast a dark shadow over the future of the United Nations and the possibility of a lasting world peace. Each of the two superpowers wanted their side to own the most powerful weapons. They competed in an arms race, each trying to develop more and more powerful nuclear weapons and more sophisticated technology for launching them. In the United States, the fear of Soviet communism grew into paranoia. Joseph McCarthy, a Republican senator from Wisconsin, ruined the careers and lives of many people by indiscriminately accusing them of supporting communism. The Soviets and the U.S. did employ spies to gather information about each other. But almost all of Senator McCarthy's accusations proved to be outrageous attacks on innocent people. His objective was to gain national attention and prominence for himself.
This concludes Unit 8, Period 8, Section 1, the Cold War.